Hello and welcome to Music Makers. Now to start, we're going to be talking about EQ. Now first, we'll talk about what methods of EQ could improve your track and what methods of EQ could possibly ruin your track. As I explained in my other videos, I see EQ as a sort of jigsaw, as all the pieces fit together. You've got sub bass, then your drums, then your bass, then your synth, and then your hi-hats and percussion maybe at the top end. And we're going to be looking at how these pieces all potentially fit together. Let's look at a diagram. So we need to separate all the separate elements. The sub, the drums, the bass, the synth and the hi-hats. We need to look at a way and as to how we can do this. Let's look at the sub bass. Now let's look at a sine wave. It's widely used as a sub bass, and also you can use guitar sub off a bass guitar. All sorts of things can be used to make a sub, even as little as piano notes played at a lower scale. So let's just look at a sine wave for instance. If I press the key, we can see here that it's hitting around 100. Yep, probably around 100 Hertz. So we want this to hit below 100 Hertz because our kick drum's going to be around 100 Hertz and our snare is going to hit around 200 Hertz. So we want the sub bass to be below both of those, which we can easily do by pitching down. So now the thing is, a lot of you probably won't hear this now. So what I'll do is I'll put an amplifier on this without switching it around, and now you probably will hear it. So now we're hitting around 50 Hertz, which is pretty much perfect because nothing else is coming in the way of this. So one thing we can do is our kick is going to come in around 100 Hertz. So with this bass, we're going to take a little dip at 100 Hertz. Let's say our kick is hitting there at 100 Hertz. So, without going across the screen, we've got where our kick is, and we're just going to make it a little bit more precise so it doesn't remove too much of the main sound. And we're now theoretically allowing our kick through with our sub. And another thing you might want to do with your sub is probably take a high cut. So we're just going to turn this on. Now this will probably look complicated to people who don't know how to use an equalizer in advanced sort of mode. So we're just going to take basically the high end out of the mix just by cutting it out, and we're pretty much there. Now another thing you can do if your snare is being affected by your sub is you can actually do the same as what I done with the kick, and you just allow it through a bit because your snare is going to be at 200. This is the 200 mark, so we're just cutting a bit of the sub bass out to allow the snare through. And it's really that simple. It's really that simple. So we've covered sub bass and how that fits into that lower part of the jigsaw puzzle. Now we're going to take a look at the drums. So with the drums, you want a low cut probably around 70 to 90 Hertz, maybe around those sort of areas. Don't go by my specific numbers, find an area where you think sounds nice, because that's what music's all about, essentially, sounding nice. So don't copy these exact numbers. So we've discussed the low end of the kick, which needs to be cut off to act as the second part of the puzzle. So what about the mid and the high of the kick? Because we can see it's quite a long thing. If we see there, it's covering the whole spectrum. So we're probably going to want to allow for the bass and the synth to come through a bit. So we'll take a little bit out of the center of the kick. Now, we can see it sounds quite fat as well, and it's going to allow plenty of space for stuff to come through in the middle of the mix. So we'll move on to the snare. No, we won't. We'll finish off with the kick. We'll go back to the kick. Right. We're going to also want to take some of the high end out of the kick, so it's not interfering with our hi-hats and maybe other elements of the track. So we're probably going to cut this around 10. Sounds pretty good. Now we'll move on to the snare. So with the snare, we're pretty much going to want to do the same thing. Except this time, we're going to want to allow a little bit of space for the kick, just to have us impact. So we're probably going to cut this off around 1, 2, 3. And the high end, maybe around around 13. Try and get it in as far as you can without ruining the sound or changing the sound in any sort of way. So we'll move on to the hi-hats. So with the hi-hats, these are not tremendously bad, you know, to sort of get into your mix. So we're just going to cut these off around 500 Hertz. And here we'll probably maybe go around maybe 16, try and get it a little lower, maybe. But for the purpose of this, the hi-hat's going to be at the highest end of your mix. So we've got a kick, a snare and a hi-hat, all EQ'd in their bands. Now we've got a straight playing bass at the bottom, which is just one note playing with no effects, barring a distortion just to bring the sound up a bit. So we've discovered now how we can get all three playing in their bands clearly. Let's play it through. Now this is of no musical composition, this is just to show you 4 elements playing in their bands. Okay, now so the last part we're going to look at is the synth. We know it needs to be out of the way of the kick, the snare and the sub bass, so we're going to pull this right back with a low cut to about 300 Hertz. This is also so it doesn't affect the mono range below that. So we also know it needs to be out of the way of the hi-hats, so we're going to bring this back to probably around 5, yeah, probably around 5,000 K, and that's pretty much it. Now you can apply this to any percussionary pieces or any extra effects just to put in your own music. So tune in next time on how to limit your music.